Electricity Minister Dr Kgosientsho Ramokgopa has promised, or should we say praised, Eskom's improved performance over the past few months. He says the Energy Action Plan is starting to bear fruit as South Africa experiences a nearly month-long reprieve from load shedding. Ramokgopa joining us in studio right now to discuss this and other Eskom-related plans. Minister, good evening to you, and thank you very much for making the time.
Evening to the viewers. Thank you very much for the invitation.
So I believe today you were in Limpopo visiting the Medupi and Matimba power stations. Give us your honest observation about the performance of these two plants.
Well, firstly, Medupi is important and sits on the critical path to the resolution of load shedding. It's one of the two newest power stations, and we know that we lost unit number 4 through a hydrogen gas explosion in August of 2021. So we needed to take action, that is Eskom, to ensure that we replace that generator as quickly as possible. Yeah. And the options that were available at the time suggested that there were significantly long lead times. And in fact, the new generator will only arrive in 2025, I think November, December. So they had to think of more innovative ways of ensuring that we are able to get the 800 megawatts earlier than the end of 2025. They found a second-hand generator, and that generator has since been transported into the country. And today I went to experience it myself. It's ready. They are preparing the civil works. And the promise is that by September of 2024, this year, so in the next 5 months or so, we'll get that 800 megawatts. So I'm saying it's on the critical path because if you look at the 800 megawatt promise of Medupi 4, and you also look at Kusile unit number 6, which will be synchronized by October of this year, and the return of unit number 2 of Kubek, which will give us 980 megawatts. We know that Kusile Unit 6 gives us 800 megawatts. So we know that just from Eskom generation fleet, we'll get 2,500 megawatts. And I have not yet accounted for what we'll get as new generation capacity from a private sector, and also what is the impact on the accelerated rollout of rooftop solar solution by both households and industry, essentially reducing demand on the grid and generating for themselves behind the meter. So just accounting for the megawatts generated from Eskom. So this sits on the critical path. And once we are able to deliver on those 3, we have, like I said, an additional 2,500 megawatts. We are much, much closer to the resolution of the load shedding question in the country.
That's very encouraging, Minister. We'll come back to these encouraging words a little later to this conversation, because I think South Africans are on tenterhooks to know for how long are we going to experience this load shedding reprieve. But I want to bring up a different subject matter altogether. The IMF, International Monetary Fund, coming out to say that South Africa is only going to experience growth of 0.9% this year. And that's because of the multiple crises, whether you talk the logistics sector, electricity shortages, including the infrastructure problems that the country is experiencing right now. That's obviously an indictment on a department such as yours. The question is, how are you working to fix this, specifically electricity, on a permanent basis? And key to that question, Minister, is definitive timelines.
No, those are correct reflections. If also you look at the projections by National Treasury, the South African Reserve Bank, and some of the reputable consulting firms in the country and globally, they do make the point that South Africa's projected growth will be sub 1% as a result of those 3 structural constraints, as you have correctly mentioned it. And that's why I've made the point, and Cabinet has made this point, that it's important that we accelerate the resolution of load shedding, because it undermines the growth prospects of the country, is truncating if you like, the GDP of the country is putting people out of employment, competitiveness is on the decline. So South Africa becomes increasingly an unattractive investment destination. Yes. So I accept that. So, and to your question, so the President unveiled the Energy Action Plan in July of 2022, and it identifies 5 outcomes. And the number 1 outcome is that you must fix Eskom, because there's a general appreciation that your quickest path to the resolution of the load shedding problem is to ensure that you improve the performance of the installed fleet, because these are sunk costs, these are an installed fleet. And then, of course, you must ramp up participation of private sector, new generation, rooftop solar solutions. The bid windows must be accelerated, and you know the constraint there, it's around transmission. And that's why, parallel to the conversation or the actions that we are doing in ensuring that we improve the performance of the Eskom fleet, we have new generation capacity. I mean, just the other day, I was launching the biggest renewable battery combination hybrid solution in the Northern Cape. Gives us 540 megawatts of solar PV, 240 megawatts of battery. So what that does is we found a solution that attempts to approximate what I call base load condition. Remember that the significant constraint of solar PV is that when you have inclement weather during your peaks, the morning and evening, you don't have the benefit of solar PV. You only have it during the day when really demand is significantly lower. So what you want to do is that that excess generation capacity that you have during the day, then you are able to recharge your batteries, and during peak periods, then you are able to draw your energy consumption from batteries. And then the definitive date, no, I mean, I will not come before the nation and peddle lies. So I'm not in a position to tell you a definitive date. I'm in a position to tell you of the significant improvements that we have made by the end of the year. I'll tell you why that's not possible for now. So I've told you about the 2,500 megawatts. My own computation, I think you need an additional 5,000 megawatts. So essentially it's that 2,500 megawatts and another 2,500 megawatts. It's essentially to get to a point where there's significant headroom that allows you an opportunity to do significant maintenance, and also accommodating the reality of some of these units failing, because we have not gotten to a stage where we've established a degree of reliability of the unit. So if you had to have a cluster of units failing, you know you have that buffer, so you don't have to initiate load shedding. So once you get that 2,500 megawatts, will succeed. And that's why Eskom is running this standard offer program. We want to get about 4,000 megawatts, 400, I think, or 15 megawatts is already contracted, 600 is under negotiations, and it will continue to ramp up. Right. So I'm saying once we are able to finalize those, then I'll be able to say to the country that we have now load shedding behind us, but it will be a height of folly. I will not mislead the nation and come here and make those false claims. I mean, tell no lies and claim no easy victories. I mean, it could be convenient, politically expedient to say we have resolved load shedding. No, we haven't. So we're seeing significant improvements.
Those are such critical words, and honesty is what South Africans need from people like you. And I am not going to try and make you answer for a statement that was made by the country's number 2. But it is important for you to at least put that in the clear, because the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, says load shedding will come to an end by the end of this year. Is that statement wrong?
Yeah, so what we do is that you generate scenarios. So in terms of the optimistic scenario, the shortest period to resolve load shedding. So I've told you about the 2,500 megawatts. And the actions that we must do, I think, as a state, working with private sector, to accelerate the onboarding of renewables. And one of the biggest constraints is on the transmission. So you know that we have now operationalized the National Transmission Company of South Africa. So we have had discussions with them. So what we know is that there are 3 corridors in the country. If we are to prioritize those, we can get an additional 2,300 megawatts. Now the NTCsa, as a new board, is doing reflections on the proposals that we have made. So once we find each other, you account for this 2,500, you account for the 2,300 that we are likely going to get in an accelerated roadmap in relation to the rollout of transmission, the infrastructure that is required to unlock the 2,300 megawatts, then yes, you are closer to, you could resolve that by the end of the year. And then there's a more plausible case. What is that plausible case? Is that you are highly unlikely to roll out that transmission in the remaining 6 months. It could take you about 8 months to do that. So essentially that 2,300 megawatts could come in the first quarter of next year. So if that is the most plausible case, then it puts it to first quarter of next year. And the more pessimistic case, that industry is not ready, we are unable to find a more attractive instrument to finance that transmission, it can take us significantly longer. Then it drags to the end of mid next year or the end of next year. So what is the point I'm making? Is that once we resolve that question with the NTCsa, I'll be the first one to communicate to the country. I'll come back to you and say that by this date, we are confident that we'll be able to resolve it.
All right, but Minister, look, I'm desperate to move on to this because you're already touching on the transmission company. But in essence, that long answer about whether or not the Deputy President is correct or wrong, the answer from you is that he is wrong.
No, the Deputy President not necessarily wrong. But I'm just saying, I can't state it in absolute terms. I'm just saying that period of us adding that additional 2,300 megawatts, the 2,005 we know is going to come by the end of the year, is that 2,300 megawatts. Once we resolve that, I'm confident I'll come back to you and say by this date. But yes, once you get closer to end of the year, outside the transmission, the resolution of the transmission question, you are really confident about having significant period of no load shedding. But I'm saying give me time. You know, one of the things that I think should be it's a pact I have, unwritten, with yourselves, the media and the country, is just to be candid and brutally honest. I really want to say to the nation that load shedding will come to an end tomorrow. I can't make that statement. It's an unsubstantiated statement. The facts before me suggest that I know of the 2,500 megawatts. We must find this 2,300 megawatts. And this is outside Eskom now. It's private sector investments. It's the state investing in the transmission. I'll be the first one to come here. And I do understand the impatience and the grievance, Kgosientsho.
Let's talk about the National Transmission Company of South Africa. You've already touched on it. When is it that we can expect to start or to see this start running? And the reason I'm asking this question is that there are concerns that there could be a conflict of interest in that Eskom will be a generator, the owner and operator of the transmission grid. Will these be addressed by the time that the transmission company begins operating?
Oh yes, I think it's a valid concern. So what the Electricity Regulation Amendment Act does, it's a bill now, it's gone through the first house, it's going to the NCOP. We're confident that before the conclusion of the 6th administration, it would have been passed. What it does principally two things. So the first one, essentially, it opens up the space. So it creates the NTCsa. Now it's recognized in law. And the expectation is that what the NTCsa is that will create conditions that allows for transparency and equity in the manner in which we are able to onboard new generation capacity. So it removes, if you like, what you refer to as an inherent bias towards Eskom, because Eskom, the parent company, is the sole shareholder in the NTCsa. So it creates those conditions to make it possible for private generators to have access to generation. And then it democratizes the space. What do I mean by that? So it allows for the creation of a transparent platform that could use a private generator, can enter into a transaction with Ramokgopa, is a private off-taker, and they use this platform to transport the electrons, because we are likely going to be in different geographies. You are likely going to be somewhere in the Northern Cape. I'm likely going to be in an area of significant load where industry is located, perhaps in Gauteng. So once you produce those electrons, you need the highways and byways. You need to transport them. So it's the transmission lines that are going to allow you to ensure that the transaction happens. Yeah. So the NTCsa is going to ensure that this is a democratic and transparent platform. But I think your concerns are genuine, to say that there's an inherent bias. Yeah. And that's what the bill attempts to do, to ensure that it crystallizes that space and make it possible for everyone to have see-through, a general appreciation, but also someone who's not a large-scale utility or high-intensity consumer could know who else is generating this megawatt and enter into that private transaction and not necessarily be biased towards Eskom as a generator, actually.
Part of the reason why the transmission company of South Africa needs to start running, Minister, is that data out today by Finmark says that the South African consumer is struggling with the cost of living. Now, the transmission company is expected to lower the prices of energy. I hope that is the correct way of seeing it. If so, how is that going to be achieved?
Oh, not necessarily the transmission company. Remember the point I made earlier on is that it enables the participation of multiple producers. So if you really want to have an off-taker, if you like a customer, you must be price competitive. So what that does is that it encourages the adoption of technologies, the introductions of efficiencies, right. That there must be significantly lower cost associated with production, and you can pass it through to the end consumer. And that's why we think that the opening up of that space, what it does, amongst many things, one of those investments in the South African economy, innovations, greater efficiencies, competition, but the one that is relevant to the question you have asked is to bring down the cost. So I don't necessarily rely on a monopoly that is called Eskom on the generation side. There are other market players that can produce more efficiently, they are price competitive, and there's no one that stops me from transacting with that person or that generator, because the NTCsa will have created that platform. Yeah. So that's what we see as the end result there, truly. And yes, you are absolutely correct. I mean, just the 12% increase on the Eskom side, we know that municipalities are coming now in July. By the way, they are going to place an additional surcharge on that tariff. So the consumer is really throttled. Yeah. And I think that the introduction of this, amongst others, eases the pain, doesn't resolve it. I think over a period of time, once the market forces are at play, you are likely going to achieve that. But I want to emphasize the following point, is that one of the things that we are doing together with the Eskom board is to ensure that we don't create condition where Eskom is completely eroded on the generation side. Right. And that's why Eskom must defend its position of generating that 47 gigawatts. And what it's going to do now as part of this efforts we are making is to play in that renewable energy space. Eskom has got the land, Eskom has got the transmission capacity, Eskom doesn't have the balance sheet to make those investments, so you can find bespoke instruments that draws from the liquidity of the private sector. Partner with Eskom. Eskom already has skin in the game. Over a period of time, that assets revert back to Eskom, and Eskom is able to pass on those benefits of investments in new technology, the cost of production being lower. If you like, your capital efficiency is much better at Eskom because it's got the sunk cost in the form of these assets, and then you are able to pass it on to the end consumer.
Final question, Minister, and briefly, if you can. You've dismissed suggestions that this load-shedding free period we are enjoying is somehow an election ploy. The DA has said this. The EFF is the latest party to say it. Can you assure us that come winter time, we are not going to be punished for what we seem to be enjoying now. In other words, I suppose the question is, are these power stations not being run to the ground as previously suggested in order for the party, the governing party of the day, to be seen favorably in the eyes of the voters?
Let me make this point just to say that at best that proposition is illogical, and let me undermine its underpinning logic. It suggests that the incumbent government would have intentionally orchestrated something that is called load shedding, essentially undermining the ability of the country to reach its potential. You have just made the point that the IMF projects that the growth will be sub 1%, including other reputable institutions. And in the course of that, devastated the South African economy. Put people into to join the unemployment lines, close industries, really made life unbearable. And then much closer to the election, then resolve this problem, when in fact it has created a much bigger problem that undermines its electoral prospects. I'm just saying, just on that score, it's illogical. But just to come to the questions that you are asking directly, I've been in the public space consistently. So I had said that our relationship with the public will be defined by transparency, candidness, and just a genuine illustration of our intention to resolve this. I've made the point, President Ramaphosa unveiled the Energy Action Plan 2022, and then it's got 5 outcomes. I've been reporting on those outcomes. And if you remember very well, when we went into winter, I said the following. I said that we are going to engage the open cycle gas turbine, essentially ban the diesel, to ensure that we get out of the winter of 2023. But the other side of winter, we are going to go in an aggressive maintenance because of the fiscal support we received from National Treasury. Just from about September of last year, ramped up plant maintenance, reached the heights of about 18% of our installed generation capacity went into plant maintenance. Unprecedented, for the first time done in a period of 3 years. And I had said that short-term pain, long-term gain. That because as a result of accelerated plant maintenance, took out a lot of units, and then we had a cluster of units failing, we went to stage 6. I said to the country, short-term pain, long-term gain. I say we are going to see the result. What are we seeing now? These units are coming back. It's a coincidence. It's May the 29th. But I'm telling you, there is no incumbent government that can take action that undermine its electoral prospects, to put people into conditions of unemployment, and some of them into abject poverty, and expect that to resolve this problem, they'll vote for it. It doesn't work that way. By the way, some of the actors we have mentioned, the leader of the EFF said this unflinchingly, that there is going to be grid collapse. There is no grid collapse. Just say that on the 29th of May, when people are counting, the lights will be off. What kind of prophecy is that? And then the less I say about the leader of the opposition, the better. I mean, I think his weaknesses are apparent for everyone to see. For you to understand this complex engineering system, you need more than just a post-matric qualification. And we know where the fellow stands. So I don't think that I'm going to merit a warrant. They don't warrant my response. So essentially, it just go up in smoke. We are going to resolve the preeminent question that is facing the South African public.
Okay. All right. Minister Ramokgopa, let me thank you very much for your time. Minister of Electricity. He says it's sheer coincidence that plant performance is doing what it is doing right now in order to give us the electricity supply that is uninterrupted.